When it comes to bonsai, speed is usually not of the essence, but there are cases when rapid growth can be an advantage. Let's imagine that you have two identical Chinese elm bonsai, one that was grown traditionally over 20 years and another that was grown with the use of stimulants over just 2 years. Which one would you guess is the older one? If you guessed the one on the left, you'd be wrong. That's the 2-year-old. The 20-year-old would look something like this. There are some circumstances where a bonsai grower might want to speed up the growth of their tree. Often it has to do with the shape of the trunk. We call this taper. A straight trunk is boring. We want taper. But most trees grown in cultivation, which is where we get our bonsai from, have weak or no taper at all. This is because they grow in a monoculture situation where they do and compete with other trees for space. So the trunk just grows wider instead of taller. Taper is usually created by pruning off the lower branches, which will then cause the tree to self-thin and create that taper as it grows upward. But if you wait 20 years for this to happen, well, then you'll be 20 years older and maybe even outlive your tree. So instead, growers use chemical growth regulators like Ethifun to force the tree to grow downward, thereby creating taper. But here's where things can get complicated. When we apply Ethifun, the trunk of the tree begins to thicken disproportionately at the top. So after treating a tree for several years, you end up with a thick top and a skinny bottom. To make matters worse, the branches remain the same thickness throughout. So you end up with this strange bonsai with a thick top and super skinny bottom branches. Once you spot this, you know that the tree was grown rapidly. It's really obvious when the tree is young, but as the tree ages, the effect is less obvious. However, if you look closely at the wood, you'll see that the grain is still wonky. There's this swirling pattern inside the trunk that points to uneven and rapid growth. The two Chinese elms shown earlier were both grown with Ethifun, but the one on the left was heavily dosed every year for 4 years, while the one on the right was only lightly dosed for 8 years. You can see that the one on the left has that telltale swirling grain and that strange, exaggerated taper. Even though the tree on the right was treated for twice as long, it doesn't look nearly as bad, because the difference between 8 years of moderate growth and 4 years of excessive growth isn't that noticeable. Another sign of excessive growth is the leaf size. Most trees grown in nature have small leaves, but the leaves of stimulant-grown bonsai tend to be much larger. It's not always easy to spot, but if you know what you're looking for, you'll find it. Take these two Chinese junipers, for example. The one on the left has normal juniper foliage. The one on the right has much larger leaves. This is because it was grown with the use of Ethifun and probably paclobotrysil as well. But does anyone care about any of this? These are all cosmetic concerns. Bonsai grown with the use of stimulants can look perfectly fine. They can be healthy trees that live long lives. However, there's this inherent instability when you use chemicals to manipulate the tree into growing in a certain way. The aesthetics of time cannot be replicated in a laboratory. Long-term aesthetic effects. Traditional bonsai matures gracefully. With age, bark cracks naturally, branches thicken proportionately, and the tree acquires a subtle dignity known as wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection and impermanence. In contrast, bonsai grown with the use of stimulants often suffers from imbalance. Swollen trunks may not harmonize with thin branches. Leaves may appear unnaturally large, or the overall structure may lose coherence as the effects of the chemicals wear off. What looks dramatic today may appear distorted tomorrow. The aesthetics of time cannot be replicated in a laboratory. As we saw before, you can mitigate the negative effects of stimulants by reducing the amount and frequency of application, but this takes time and patience. Some growers never use stimulants at all and instead practice patience. They understand that the refinement process is just as important as the growth phase. Others use stimulants without hesitation, knowing that they'll do the necessary work to undo the damage. Still, others fall somewhere in between. They use mild stimulants in moderation. For them, it's all about doing no harm. They simply want to nudge the tree in the right direction, not force it. If you fall into this last category, then you're in luck because there's a new kid on the block, a natural alternative to synthetic stimulants. Plant growth regulators, or PGRS as they're called, are natural plant hormones that occur in trace amounts in various parts of plants. Ethifun, which is the main ingredient in most stimulants, is a synthetic version of the plant hormone cytokinin. Cytokinins promote cell division, which leads to increased shoot growth. In the case of bonsai, this means more branches and leaves. Naturally occurring cytokinins are produced in the root system and transport upwards through the tree. This is why it's so important to maintain a healthy root system. If the roots are struggling, then so is the tree. In recent years, growers have figured out how to extract cytokinins from plants like corn and coconut milk and bottle it up as a liquid. By applying it to the soil, we mimic the natural process of the roots producing cytokinins and thereby stimulating the tree. Not only that, but it also encourages beneficial microbes in the soil. In contrast, synthetic cytokinins like Ethifun don't have these added benefits and can negatively affect the soil food web. While there's been limited research on the use of PGRS for bonsai, the results have been promising. According to those who have experimented with it, PGRS produce much more subtle growth, almost indistinguishable from naturally grown bonsai. Furthermore, it appears that the buds on PGR-grown trees are more frost-resistant, which makes them more suitable for outdoor growing. While more research is needed, PGRS show a lot of potential for bonsai. So far, we've talked about the aesthetic effects of stimulants, but what about the health of the tree? Are there any negative side effects? Well, yes. Trees grown with the use of stimulants tend to be unstable and unhealthy. Here's why. When you grow a bonsai with the use of stimulants, you're manipulating the tree into growing faster than it normally would. To support this accelerated growth, the tree needs more nutrients. And so the grower must fertilize accordingly. Often this results in nutrient imbalances. For example, excessive nitrogen can lead to chlorosis, a condition where the leaves turn yellow due to a lack of chlorophyll. Another problem is that fast-growing trees are more susceptible to pests and diseases. This is because they're growing in an unnatural way, which weakens the tree and makes it vulnerable to attack. For example, let's take a look at these two Chinese elms. Both were grown with the use of Ethifun, but the one on the right was also dosed with paclobutrazol. Paclobutrazol is another commonly used chemical that slows down growth. So it's often paired with Ethifun, which speeds up growth, to create a balanced response. In this case, the elm on the right grew slowly and became very dense, which made it more susceptible to a fungal disease. Not only that, but the bark of the trunk didn't develop properly and turned brown instead of staying green. It's important to note that not all bonsai grown with stimulants become diseased. However, it's a real possibility that shouldn't be overlooked. Just like human beings, trees need to grow at their own pace. Some species grow quickly and some grow slowly. Applying stimulants to slow-growing species like pines is pointless. You might as well just accept the fact that it'll take decades to get anywhere. On the other hand, stimulating a fast-growing species like Chinese elms too much will throw off the balance of the tree and possibly compromise its health. Ideally, you should only use stimulants when absolutely necessary. For example, if the trunk has no taper, if the branch structure is weak, or if the tree is too old to grow. But if you have a young tree, let it grow. Enjoy the journey and appreciate the beauty of time.